turn it over to Sarah and Jillian to talk about their trip. Thank you.
Okay. Well, some of you may be wondering, how did this happen? And Jillian is probably still wondering, how did this happen? Most of the women in the ladies' Bible class know how this came about, but I'll just tell the rest of you right quickly. Of course, all of you know that Gary and I have been involved with the work in Tanzania since about 2002, I believe. And then he's involved now in more works throughout the world. But back in February, on a Saturday, Jean Coffey had hosted a ladies group there at her home, and she had asked Jillian to bring the devotional. And during that devotional, this is why you learn, keep your mouth shut. During that devotional, she said something about she had always wanted to go to other places and teach and so on. And it's happening now. I'm getting chill bumps but I was like, oh, wow. And so I could hardly wait for her to finish the devotional. And I was right beside you. And I said, what if I could arrange things for us to go to Safari for Souls in Tanzania on the first week of June? And she was kind of like, and Annette was, I'm not really sure.
She was a little more fearful.
How are we going to do this? And of course, the money was one concern, but I had tremendous confidence in all of you. I knew that would not be a problem. And I'm just, some people think I'm a real deep thinker, but I'm really just kind of a simple thinker. I just believe when we get out there and say we're going to do something in the Lord's kingdom, that He works it out for us, and He worked it out. And so on June 7th, we were on a flight, a Delta flight going to Atlanta, Georgia. And then from Atlanta, we met a group in Atlanta from the Hoover Church in the Birmingham, Alabama area. And I had been corresponding with Sid Hoover, no, not Sid Hoover, Sid Altman. I had Hoover written down under it. But I'd been corresponding with him because he was kind of the leader of that group, and he had been working with the Tanzanian work for about 10 years. And he has been real successful in commercial real estate. And I think it's Dollar General, right? I think that's what they told us. So when you see a Dollar General store, you can think about Tanzania. But he is using a lot of his wealth, like Ed was talking about today, in storing up treasures in heaven. And he really loves Tanzania, and he loves that work. And so we were thankful to be involved with him. And that's how we got these T-shirts. He sent me 20 T-shirts like this. And I thought about wearing mine today, but I had to wear it so much over there. I just got plain tired of it. But we wore these T-shirts every day. But Jillian and I had to bring 20 T-shirts. And also we brought some DVDs that he had sent us from the World Video Bible School that we were to bring. And he had sent packages like this to everyone that was on the trip. All of us had to bring some different things. We arrived at Kilimanjaro International Airport at about 10:30. Our flight was delayed an hour and a half in Amsterdam. And so you can imagine how tired we were. And Jillian looked at this picture and said, where did you get that? The airport doesn't look that good. And she's right, it doesn't look quite that good, but it looks better than it did the first time I saw it. But at night, it was really kind of bad. And the other thing was they knew the flight was going to be late. So you would think they would keep everybody there to process the visas and all like that. There were 2 people to process the visas for all these people that came in on this flight that had, I think it was 8 rows across, 8 seats across each row. So we were standing in line. And finally, Sid came in and he said, we've got to get out of here. Everybody give me your passport and $200. I'll take care of your visas downtown. Let's go home. So we did. Well, you may want to know where Tanzania, did you want to say anything? Oh, there's a slide forward. See, she's taking care of me. Okay. You may want to know where Arusha, Tanzania is. So I found this map on the internet, and that little bubble shows you where Arusha is. And Tanzania is in East Africa. It's close to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where a lot of unrest and tribal rivalry is going on right now. But Tanzania is very peaceful. In fact, you have a few Muslims and you have some Hindus, and then you have just about every type of denomination there. And then you just have some people that are pagan, of the typical pagan religions, but it's very peaceful there, at least now. And down below Tanzania, where you see Zambia, Malawi, and all like that, that's where the Chamala mission is. Okay. Here, and in just a minute, I'm going to ask Jillian to tell you about something, but this is a picture that was made in 2003, and you can see me there and Gary, and their sign, Stephanie Stafford, that we'll talk about in just a little bit, but I wanted to give you a wee bit of history of that work, and I asked Gary to do that, and he said, no, you know as much about it as I do, so I'm giving you a little bit of the history of that work. This building was the only church building in Arusha. And Arusha is about the size of Dallas proper, not with all the suburbs, but about the size of Dallas proper. And this was the only church building, and Andrew Conley built this building. It was the first, I think the last work that he did was there in Arusha, and he built this particular building. And this shows us after the worship service, and I want Jillian to tell you what she experienced after the worship service, and this is what they do in every congregation there.
So we got there, and I think Sunday was our third day there. Yeah. We, for the first 2 days, were getting over jet lag, so we took it pretty easy. And the church service there on Sunday was one of the first things that I got to experience in terms of how they ran their church, I suppose. And it was an amazing experience because they have so much emotion with everything that they do, and all their singing and their prayers and their sermons. It's beautiful. And at the end of every service, they will sing one last song, and while they're singing, they'll go outside and everyone will shake hands. But the way they do it is the first person will walk outside, and then the next person will shake their hand and stand next to them. And then the next person that comes out will shake your hand, their hand, and then stand next to them until you have the entire congregation lined up and they're all singing. And it was, I don't know how to describe it. It was just such a cool experience because you get to see everyone's face in the congregation, and you're not talking to each other, but you're conveying your love for Christ just through your singing and your handshaking and just being able to look into their eyes, because you all know that you share that love for Christ just by doing this simple thing at the end of every service. And we went to two churches while we were in Tanzania. The El Kure Church of Christ was the first one we went to on the first Sunday, and then the Mount Meru Church of Christ on the second Sunday, and they both did this this experience. I don't know the word for it. So
yeah, it's an interesting experience if you haven't been able to do that. And I knew to expect it, but she didn't know to expect it. And then we were wondering, you know, they only have one door in the building, and we were wondering what would happen if we closed the doors and just had one door here and did this. Some people might be late to eat or something like that. Several years ago, well, in fact, in 2003 and on up for several years after that, there was only one church building in Arusha, and that was this particular building. Now, I want you to think about it. Think about how large the Fort Worth area is. Just take the city limits of Fort Worth. Don't include Arlington, North Richland Hills, and all those other places. And think about the fact that there's just one church building downtown, and you have to walk to get to services. You could sometimes get public transportation, but it's not very reliable. You might stand and wait forever for a dolly to come by, or you might get one coming by real quickly. And that was what these Christians were facing, and also not having preachers. And that is why the school was established, to have preachers, so that preachers could go out into villages around, and also could fill pulpits around in the area of Arusha. And now there are, I think, what, Gary, how many congregations in Arusha now? Yeah, about 7 in the city out around, so that way people have a place that they can worship that's close by. And even then, you know, most of them walk. Very few people have a car to drive. Okay, this is where the school met at the very first. And this building was built a little before 2003, but the school was meeting there, but it outgrew that place. And now in this particular place, and this is real close to downtown, now the Arusha Bible School meets there, which is a training for men who speak mainly Swahili. And also women can go through the program there. But the new area is outside of Arusha, although Arusha is growing and kind of taking in this area, this Kasanga area. And this is where the building now is, and this is where Jillian and I stayed, and all of the other people that were with us, because school was not in session. And if this laser works, I'll show you where we were. It doesn't want to work now. Oh, there it is. We were in the rooms right over here. This is a big open area tabernacle-like thing. And then these are dorms over in here. And that's where most of the other people were staying. But Jillian and I had one room, then there was a bathroom between us, and then there's other room, and Elena, and I forgot
Tiffany.
And Tiffany. I could think Jennifer, Brittany, and everything except Tiffany. Okay, Elena and Tiffany, 2 young women from the Hoover congregation, were there. And I felt quite at home, because Gary and I had stayed in these rooms a few times before. There's a library and offices down this way. The kitchen is back here, and then the classrooms are right there. But that's where we stayed, and we got there at about 1 o'clock in the morning. So we were glad to go to bed. Most of you will recognize Andrew Conley. I was hoping that Charles and Barbara could stay for this, but one of the missionary wives who had been there in the past was a good artist, and she painted this on the wall inside the school, and also painted some giraffes and maps and a few other things inside there. So it looks really nice, but I knew that many of you had known Andrew in the past and would want to know about that.
And Karibuni means welcome.
Yeah, it means big welcome.
They say that a lot. Everybody that you meet, every time you see someone, they will say Karibuni, and they'll welcome you into their house, or they'll just greet you. They're so nice over there.
And then many of you know that we had been for about 2 years praying regularly for Brother Cy Stafford. This is Cy and Stephanie. Cy met Andrew about, 15 years ago, something like that. And he heard Andrew talk passionately about the work in Arusha, Tanzania. And so Cy became interested in that work. And he and Stephanie had been in Tanzania about 15 years. They're mainly in Arusha. Living there and working with the people, and the native people loved them. Cy was just like one of them. And getting the school going and all like that was his dream. And of course, you remember that Cy passed away in January of this year. But he has definitely left his influence there in Tanzania. And probably he planned to stay there 20 to 25 years, as long as his health let him stay there. One thing that Si always did, and I've started doing this some, is on all of his emails when he signed off, and you can turn around up here, it's in Swahili on the back of here. On the back, that's in Swahili, but Si would always sign off until all have heard. And so this was what we had on the back of our t-shirts in memory of him, and also thinking about the fact that it's important to teach the gospel until all have heard. And then I want to go on and show you Charles and Ahimi Dewey. These are two of the young men that are teachers in the school. They went through the School of Preaching and also through the graduate program there. And Charles is the one that's smiling. He's almost always smiling. And the guys over there say he's the only one that can hold his own with Gary. And they say he's a lot like Gary, in fact. I don't know if that's good or bad. Ahimi Dewey is pretty serious. He's the more serious ones. These two have been working on translating my book, my first book, and they had it completely translated. Charles told me, he said, I've read that book 30 times. And I thought, I haven't read it 30 times. And Jean, you haven't read it 30 times, had you? But they have it now with some of the women reading it for typos and things like that. And then they'll be printing it up to use there in Tanzania. And it's especially good because especially the women there don't have a lot of teaching tools. They don't have a lot of things that help them really learn the scriptures and so on. And I just feel really blessed about that because, you see, I wanted to go to Africa when I was 17. And so I feel good that the first place that my book is being translated is in Africa. But these two are really good. Then Godfrey and Desderi and Michael were also working with us on the book, but I didn't have pictures of them. Gary wanted to make sure that you knew that he did teach over there a few times. So he had that picture in there, and you can see one of the classrooms. And here is a picture just of that open area that is out there. You see, in Tanzania, you just have a rainy season and a dry season, but you don't have really, really cold or really, really hot. And so you don't need air conditioning all that much. And it was winter over there for them. It didn't feel like winter at all, did it?
It was a little cold in the mornings, but by the end of the day, it was not winter.
But I just wanted to show you just how large that area is. And then Jillian said, why did you put this picture of me in there? But I wanted you to see our room. And this is kind of what the rooms look like, all of them, the twin beds there. And then on Jillian's side, there's a large closet. And on my side over there, there was a desk, and then there was a bathroom between us, and in another room just like that. And that's the way the student rooms were.
And the white things hanging from the ceiling are mosquito nets, and you put those over your bed when you sleep at night.
Yeah.
Make sure you don't get bug bites.
Yeah, and we were good about doing that because her grandparents were really worried about mosquitoes and malaria. So we tried to be good about that. Let's see, there was something else that ran through my mind that I was going to say and I forgot it. But what was I going to say? Oh, well, it'll come back later.
There is a story. There is a story that goes along with the beds. Our very first day, the very first morning.
Yeah, I was going to tell that. Go ahead and tell it.
The very first morning, we made our beds because we're taught to make our beds by our mothers and fathers. That's how we do it. And we got back to the building that night, and one of the women who works there, she came up to us and she said, "Did you sleep last night?" And we said, "Yes, we did." And she said, "Your beds were made." And we were like, because our mothers taught us. And she said, "You're not supposed to do that. I make your beds." So from that night on, or that morning, we stopped making our beds because she made it for us.
That went from my brain right over to yours. That's how we got it there. Then Justin and Anna Maynard live just about, half a block or less from the school in a house that was built actually for Si and Stephanie, since they thought they would be staying there forever. But it was built by the Hattiesburg congregation on this same property. And Justin and Anna have been working in farming. The land in Tanzania is fertile land, but the people don't have the equipment and sometimes the knowledge to make it produce as well as it could. And so they have started a farming endeavor there on the property. And let's see, it was on Friday morning. Yeah, on Friday morning, everyone was to tour the farm. Well, I grew up on a farm and I didn't need to tour a farm. Also, I needed to meet with my translator to make sure that all of my charts and things that I had for the lesson I was going to do for the ladies Sunday morning were translated correctly. I had used a computer translation and some of the words were not exactly correct. But Jillian toured the farm, so she's going to tell you a little bit about the farm.
So the farm, like she said, Justin and Anna's house is about half a block apart from the Andrew Conley School of Preaching. So you can access the farm from the school and from their house. We started from their house, and right next to the Maynard's house, you have all of the produce that they grow, and they grow the same things that we do. And Justin helps the students at the school grow the produce around here. He helps, teach them just how to do the simple process of planting and just taking care of everything. And as you go closer to the school, right behind the school, they have their animals. So they have cows and they have chickens and goats. And of course, the students learn to maintain all of that. And they use the produce and the things that they get from the animals, they sell it for their benefit, and they also do eat some of it for themselves as well. So they're able to raise money for the school and continue buying materials and things such as that.
Yeah, so she got to pet the goats and the cows for Gary. I don't like to pet goats and cows. Then Friday afternoon, well, Friday for lunch, and then the rest of the afternoon, we spent here in the Cultural Heritage Center and Museum. And I just have to tell you a little bit about that. This is huge. This picture really doesn't do it justice. And this is not all of the property. That over to the right of that is another large area, which is basically a store. And then behind that is a restaurant where we ate that day, and then some smaller little stores around. But Tanzania is kind of an interesting place in this sense. Back in the 1800s, when the British were there, they brought several people from India to Tanzania as indentured servants. And so there are a lot of native Tanzanians that are of Indian descent. And they're a minority group there, but they own almost all of the successful businesses there. They're very industrious. This man, the short for his name is just Saif. It's Fundu something another. But he is Muslim, but he's a very honest businessman. He built all of this with his own money, no public money, no bond election, no tax abatement or whatever for this. He designed it and built it. And he loves the Tanzanian art and sculpture and all like that. So he has this for those artifacts to be on display and also, of course, to sell. And he is the biggest dealer in the Tanzanite jewels. That are very rare, that are there. And he is, I know, the richest man in Tanzania and probably the richest man in all of Africa. Cy Stafford was a good friend of his, was never able to convert him to Christ, but did make an impression on him, and he gives all of Cy's friends a 20% discount on anything. So I guess that was a good thing. But we toured that area on Friday afternoon. Then on Saturday, we went on safari. And I forgot the the Gorgor crater is real high and also cold. And so Jillian and I had planned to wear these shirts. I have one that's purple that's kind of like that, and I had given her that one. But we had to borrow some wraps because it was cold until later in the day there. But you can look out over the crater there. It's about 20 miles across. We saw tons of stuff. Yeah, yeah.
I just want to mention something. So as you know, the first 2 or 3 days we did work on getting over our jet lag, and we did a lot of fun things, but we also did some more laid back work to help the church before we actually went up there and did our campaign. One of the things that we did, I think it was on Friday morning, we had about 200 Bibles that were in Swahili, and in each one of these Bibles we put inserts into the front and the back covers of these Bibles, and the inserts talked about salvation and God's plan, and they also had the numbers to contact the elders at the church. And these Bibles were given to the people that we studied with at the end of the week. They were given this Bible, and a lot of these people, on the very first day when we studied with them, they wanted the Bible then because they wanted to study it that night. They just wanted to absorb everything we had taught them that day, and they wanted to learn more. And so a lot of them, we just gave the Bible to them that day after the study, and they brought it back, and they had so many questions. So although we did safaris, we also did get some things ready for the campaign. But the safari was an amazing experience because you truly get to see these animals in their natural habitat, how this magnificent crater that God made, and you could truly see his power just by how big the whole thing is. And it's insane just to see all the different animals and plants and just how everything just worked together just like it should, and it was beautiful. So one of the things we did see was a lion, and this lion is a male lion. He's a teenager. I don't know if you can tell in the picture, but he's got a little bit of hair growing right on the side. So we got to see the animals in action from God's kingdom and doing exactly what they should be. It was...
Yeah, he was ripping apart the carcass of a wildebeest that he had.
Yeah.
Now, we weren't quite that close to him. This was made with a telephoto lens, but we were close enough to see what was going on. And Jillian is right. This is one of the beautiful things about Africa, but it's also one of the difficult things in relation to Africa. The African elephant cannot be domesticated like the Indian elephant. The elephants you see in the circus or whatever that you won't see in the circus anymore because there's not a circus, but those elephants are the Indian elephants, the Asian elephants. But these elephants are huge and they can't be domesticated. The zebra cannot be domesticated. And there are several game parks around where you can visit on a safari. The first year that I was there, we went to the Arusha National Park, which is rather close to the city of Arusha. And I didn't see any big fences or anything, you know, and I made the mistake of asking Si, how do the animals know to stay in here? They don't. The animals go where they want to go. Now, generally, the animals are not, don't populate a lot around people, but sometimes a Christian out in the, far out in the areas may have a good crop of corn, and one night a herd of elephants will just come through and stomp it down. Our baboons will come through and take care of it, you know. So this is one of the challenges that they face there. Now, this is our first Sunday at the church there, and I have some arrows. I don't know if you can see them very good. The black arrow points to Jillian and me. Yeah, you can see them better up there. And the green arrows, that's Isaac and his wife Makunde. Over there, Makunde was my translator. And this red arrow points to Sid Altman. As I was telling you, he really loves the Tanzanian people and loves that work there. And so this was our first Sunday there. And all the other white faces you see there are people from the Hoover congregation. And you've already told them about worship and things that you.
I want to mention, since this was my first worship, the thing that stood out to me the most, and one of the things I will not forget, is their singing there. They sing from the heart. They truly exemplify that verse where it tells you to sing from your heart, and you can hear it. You can hear their emotion and the way they sing. It's beautiful. They don't have more than 20 people in their church, but they're so loud with their emotion and their harmony. They don't care about trying to sound perfect, or they don't care about following something. They just want to sing to show God that they love him, and you can truly hear it in all of their voices. And it was one of the most beautiful things I had heard while I was there. So I just wanted to mention that.
They don't have the typical 4-part harmony like we do. And some of the songs, the men sing a certain part and then the women sing some, but most of it is just a single melody type singing in unison. But it is, yes, it's an interesting and encouraging experience. Even if you can't understand the words, you just know that they are praising God. Now, Monday morning, we visited members of this particular congregation who had been converted the year before in the Safari for Souls there, but who had still remained faithful. And we wanted to give them a lesson of encouragement, so we did that. And we also brought them some staples, some rice and beans and cooking oil. Now, we ate well while we were there. We ate too much probably while we were there. But some of the recent government policies have made it difficult for the average Tanzanian to buy food. You go to the stores where the average Tanzanian shops and the shelves are bare. It's not that there's not food there. There is food available, but it's just not available for them for some of the, and I don't understand all of those policies, but Sid was explaining some of that to us, and that was why we were taking these provisions to the people. Another thing that Sid has done also, because dealing with the government there in Tanzania is very strange. It's not like dealing with a government agency here. And the school that we showed you pictures of it, let's see, we've had that property 18 years. And Cy and some others have been working on trying to get the title deed to that property. Sid finally got the title deed on Tuesday or Wednesday while we were there. He said it's been 18 years in the making. Every time he would go to one government office, he was told to go to another one. Then he was told to wait, and then he was told to go here and go there. And no, you need this and you need that. And it just got to be a crazy thing. But since he is in commercial real estate, he knows how to eventually get all of those things done. And one thing he is doing is getting all of the titles to all of the properties that the church owns in that area so that it can be documented. Now, after we did that good deed Monday morning, then Jillian got another experience in the Maasai market. That's where you can get things like this and some other things. The missionaries call it Mafia Alley, and when she tells you about it, you'll see why.
So here in all of Tanzania, they do not go to this, go and buy things for the price that is set on it. They bargain. And that was something new to me for sure, because I'm used to buying things for what they're set for. So you'll go and there is a lot of lines of just shops that you can go into, and they sell a variety of things like toys. A lot of them sell paintings, bracelets, and they're all handmade, and it's all beautiful work that you get to see. For me, it was a little uncomfortable though, because they try their hardest to get you into their store. So they'll stand in your way, or they'll touch you on the shoulder, or they'll start calling to you. And for me personally, it was a little nerve-wracking at first, but I did get up the courage. And by the end of the day, I went in and decided to try and bargain my way. And so a lot of us, with them, because of their culture, you have to be very blunt. And I'm used to being kind of gentle, and I'm worried I'm going to hurt someone's feelings. But So when I went, I was like, okay, I just have to be blunt. And so I did, and I was able to bargain, and they were good with it. And so it was an interesting experience to experience how the people there buy things, because it's definitely different than how we do it here.
How we do it. Then there we are in the door of the church building in Mount Meru, and I have that wrap not so much to keep me warm, but the sun was so close to us, I was burning on my arms, so I had to keep myself covered a little bit during the day. But there we are beginning the work. Here is a picture of the church building where we worked. Now they're renting this building right now, but that's where we worked. Aren't we thankful for this building that we have here? They are planning to buy property and build a building very similar to that one that you saw earlier, so that the brethren will have a good place to worship.
About this church building, the size of it is probably no bigger than the cry room that we have back there. The auditorium is no bigger than that. And they fill every available space they have. They sit in every chair, they stand in every aisle, and they will sit on the floor just to fill the space of their auditorium. And if you notice in the picture, there is bricks right outside the door. And one of the sad things that I saw while I was there, one of the things that the government does is they expand the roads. And their way of doing that is they will spray paint a red X on the front of the buildings that need to be moved, and they'll spray a line down the side on where it needs to be cut. And by the next day, it'll be cut down. They don't ask for your permission, they just go and do it. And so I wish we had a picture of the street, because all of these houses and buildings look exactly like this church building, where they've all been cut off. Because they needed to expand the road. And so it's truly a wonderful thing that they were finally able to get a new church building, and they don't have to worry about having quite a small building. They can have more room for the growing church that will be in the future. So
here is just outside the building, out beside it, and there's Makunde standing, that's my translator, and then Agnes seated there, and Agnes went with us just about all the time. And I need to tell you a little bit, especially about Agnes. She and her husband, Kamaragvi, have been members of the church there almost forever. I think Kamaragvi's parents helped begin the church there. Her English is pretty good, so we could have a good conversation. She worked for Cy and Stephanie, and she told me, she said, Cy was not my boss, he was my friend. And that's just the way he interacted with the people there. Anyway, Kamaragvi doesn't have quite as good English, but he would show up every morning, and to all of us who spoke English, he would go around and say, "Are you ready to fight the devil today?" And we were saying, "Yes, we're ready to fight the devil." Then I want you to notice something else. I think you can see it in this, especially the baby there. This baby has on a shirt and then a sweater pulled down over there. Again, this is their winter. And you see how they have on sweaters and everything. But the temperature during the day was 75 to 85 degrees. You notice one of the white guys in the background has on Bermuda shorts. You know, we was into this, we were fine. But they were freezing. And every time Makunde and I would finish a Bible study, and in the mornings I did a Bible study with a lot of the teenage girls. We started out with about 6, and then it doubled and the next day, and kept up from that time on. But every time we would finish that study and be waiting for the others to come for lunch, Makunde would say, "I am freezing, I need to get in the sun." And I would say, "I am about to melt, I need to be in the shade." So we would find a place where I could sit in the shade and she could sit in the sun. And now here is Jillian and the translator that she worked with, and I want her to tell you some about.
So this is my translator. Her name was Rachel. She was 19 years old, and she was incredibly smart. She spoke 4 languages: Swahili, English, German, and another language that I can't think of. She was incredibly smart, not only with academics, but with the Bible. And a lot of the times when we were doing our studies, she would be translating for us, and the people we were studying with would have a question, And she would turn to us before speaking to them, and she would say, what about that verse in Ephesians? Or what about in Galatians when they talk about such and such? And she would know everything, every particular verse that would help with that question. It was absolutely wonderful. When we got stuck or a little stumped, she would know exactly where to point us to, and she would always ask us first because we were the leaders of the Bible study. But she was a tremendous help with our Bible studies, an amazing translator. We could speak paragraphs and she would be able to translate it, all of it, and it was so much fun to hang out with her. It felt like I had made a wonderful friend because she was very close to my age, and I just had a lot of fun having her as my translator and making her one of my friends over there. So
now here is inside the building, and so you get kind of the idea of what Jillian was saying. And I think I have a couple of stars there, one over my head, and I think that's your head there,
yeah.
Is it? Mm-hmm. Right. Just so you would know that, yes, we were in worship Sunday, June 18th there, and Chuck Webster from the Hoover congregation is preaching, and you can barely see him there, but David Baya is translating, and David's wife, Paulina, was our first house girl when we were over there in 2003, and she was just a really sweethearted person. They had a sick child, and she finally was able to come one afternoon to see me. But it was kind of funny, and I didn't take this bad because I understood the Tanzanian culture, but if you don't understand some things about the culture, you can really get offended, because as soon as David saw me, he was shaking hands with me, and he was so glad to see me, and he said, "Oh, Sarah, you're so old and fat." Well, fat over there means that it's a good thing. It means you have enough food, and you have, that you're doing well. And they do honor their older people. So, but if some of you come up to me and say, "Sarah, you're old and fat, you better prepare to meet your maker." But I understood what David meant there. And one thing, after their Bible class, they always have question and answer, and the associate minister had taught the Bible class, and there was a question about something about baptism, and he didn't fully understand the question, so I have to give him credit for the fact that he didn't really fully understand the question, so he was trying to answer it, but he was kind of going around in circles and not really answering the question. And afterward, David Bias stood up and he said, "Well, I would like to add to that answer," and you would have been proud of him for the way he answered that. And I told him later, I said, "Well, I'm going to have to tell Gary that he and the others who taught him really did a good job there." So the brethren there are really solid in what they believe and teach. Now, this is Desderi outside. This is outside the building, and they had a children's Bible class that morning outside, and you may say, "Do they have that many children?" No, there are not that many children in the congregation. However, when the people in the village see Wazungu show up and know that something interesting is going on, the children from everywhere congregate there. And so they have an opportunity to have a Bible class, and Desderi was conducting that outside there that morning. And I forgot to tell you this also, back at the other congregation where we were that Sunday morning, I taught a class to the ladies. Jillian helped with the children's class. They had a classroom in that building, and the men had a class outside. The first year that I went there, the men got the inside and we women had to meet outside. So they're learning some things just to be nice to us. So we got to be on the inside that morning. But the children there, they love Jillian. And I told Doug I think they loved her because she, of all of us that were there, she was closest to their size. But she had a good time.
And this picture also during worship, it still looked like this. The children didn't leave after Bible class. They stayed for worship with us. And since there wasn't room within the auditorium, they all just moved their little pack closer to the door. And so they were able to listen to the word and sing along with us. And one of the things you do see there is they have a kind of system where the men will get first seating and then the women, and all the children will sit on the floor. So that's why all the children are sitting outside here. And you'll notice that they're either sitting on something or squatting because they know better than to get their church clothes messed up, just like we do here. So they're very careful.
Okay, this is a tent that was out behind the building, and this is where I had, this is not my class. In fact, this is one afternoon, Jillian and Elena were conducting a Bible study under the tent, but this is where I had the girls' class. We would just bring out some chairs and sit them there in order. And here's the kitchen. Would you like to have a kitchen like that? That's where they prepared our lunch every day. And you can see the women cutting up watermelon. I made a picture of the watermelon, especially for Gary. You can see their stove back there is just a big pot with hot coals in it. And for lunch every day, we had rice and beans. Sometimes we would have a little gravy with some kind of meat in it. And then kind of a salad, and we always had some fruit, either watermelon. One time we had avocados one time because a lady came by selling avocados that morning, and the small bananas that are super, super good. So we would have something like that for lunch, and we would usually just take a little bit of the rice and beans, you know, mainly because we had had a good breakfast that morning, eggs and bacon and fruit and stuff there at the school. But the Tanzanians would take a plate and get just tons of rice and beans and everything, mainly because it was probably the only meal they would have that day. And people ask me sometimes, well, what do they eat in Tanzania? Well, if you're a tourist and go over there, or if you're a Wazungu with a group like we were, we ate at some restaurants there and ate pretty much normal food. A lot of it is seasoned like East Indian food or something like that, but basically, normal food. But for the average Tanzanian, it's rice, beans, and hopefully some kind of fruit if it's available. And Charles Conley would want me to say ugali, which is a kind of a cornmeal mush type thing. But that was what we had for lunch.
I kind of want to mention real quick, she keeps saying Wazungu. That means that's their term for white people. Yeah. Just so you know. And the food there was probably some of the best food I'd ever tasted because none of it's processed like all of ours is here. I did start having sugar withdrawals at the end of the week, but it was some of the best food I had ever had. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, she would say, this rice and beans are so good. That's right. And I was thinking, my stomach can only take rice and beans a few days. And then if you're ever wondering what you do for mission printing, if it's helpful, these were boxes stacked up at the front, in the front of the church building there, that they will be using after the Safari for Souls, distributing this material. And people there want materials, that they are interested, they want to read, they want to know, they're very curious, at least at this point. And then here is their baptistry. So Jillian can tell about.
So while we were there, the week we were there were a total of 6 baptisms, but this campaign went on for about 2.5 weeks, and that was a total of 24 baptisms since then. And it's absolutely amazing how many people are just so willing to learn the word and everything. And this river is decently close by to the church building. It takes a little bit of a hike, but it's really not too bad. On the right side is where they will baptize people. The river is not very deep. You can stand in it and it will only go up to maybe your knees, maybe less. And so what they have to do is the people have to sit down and then they're put under. And they make sure that the legs are fully immersed before they stretch their legs out. And then they put them under after doing the confession and everything. And it was also a wonderful experience to see that. And in a river, that's what they have, and so it's what they used, and it works because it was full immersion. And they sang songs, and everyone talked to the newly baptized Christians afterwards, and it was wonderful to be able to see that. I'm really glad that I got to see at least one while I was there, because I was very interested in seeing how it worked over there. So it was amazing.
And I neglected to say this, but in the afternoons, I told you in the mornings I was doing the Bible study with the girls. In the afternoon, I had some Bible studies with individual women. Sabbatarians are really big over there, and then Lutherans and Pentecostals. That was mainly the group that we would interact with. And Jillian had about 4 or 5 studies every day that she was able to study with. But we also had some fun times when we were waiting around. She got a new hairdo. The children wanted to braid her hair like their hair was braided. And she was really good to let them play around with it. And then after they finished, they were all excited about it and wanted to, the braids don't stay in our hair like they did in theirs, but the children had fun giving her a new hairstyle.
That was the second time that they had done that, because a few days before this one, I had sat down on a rock because I wasn't feeling well. And so a bunch of kids just swarmed me and started playing with my hair. And I was like, okay, I'm too tired to stop you. So they went ahead and did that. And there were younger kids, probably below the age of 5, that did that. And it didn't turn out quite as well as this one, because there were older kids that did this one. And speaking of the kids, one of the things that you see in Tanzania is a lot of these children will not have their parents with them. They will be 4 or 5 years old, and they will be all by themselves running around. And it's completely normal for them to do that, to be just wherever they want to be. And they know where home is. They go back there at night, but it's normal to see kids everywhere, running everywhere. And it's quite funny because we brought some candy and toy cars for them to give out because, you know, it's a treat for them. So you would give one piece of candy out to one kid. They would run around the corner and come back, and there'd be about 50 more with him. And they just like to multiply no matter where you were. So when they were doing my hair, suddenly there started with 2, and then there were 10 by the end. And then like at church in the children's Bible class, you would have maybe 10 kids there, and they would all tell their friends, and you'd have maybe 50 by the end. So and it's not just the children that happens with either. It happens with the adults as well. When you're in a Bible study, it multiplies. There's people just walk in and sit down and they start listening to the study. And I've had that happen to me multiple times. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm willing to teach you as well. So it was a really cool thing to experience with that.
And this was our last Saturday evening there. And we were at Ellie Martin's house, Ellie and his wife Naima, and they have been faithful Christians for several years. And Ellie has a furniture making business that he started out in his house, and then he started building a house. And his house is still a work in progress, but it has some beautiful woodwork in it. And one thing that I wanted to tell you was about their youngest daughter. Ellie Naima is what they named her. I guess if we had another child, we could name the child Gary Sarah or something. But that was what they had named her. And she was 9 years old, and she only got to come to the girls' class one day. And so I asked the girls if they had some questions, and she asked, where did sin come from? And so that was a good question, and we started out in the study of Genesis, and in particular Genesis chapter 3. And then a little bit later in the study, I was trying to follow the curriculum that we were given for sin, and that all have sinned and so on. And so I went to Romans 5, verse 12, where by one man sin entered into the world, and her hand went up right quickly. And she said, it says by one man sin entered the world, but Eve actually sinned first. What about that? And I thought, what 9-year-old would think to ask that? But she had been paying attention. She had been taking notes and everything. And of course, that sent us on answering that and God's design for leadership and God's design for leadership in the church and in the home and so on. But I was just amazed that she was paying that close attention and would ask a question like that. But she's a really sharp young lady. And I'm not so sure if you can see how tired we are, but Doreen here in the front looks like she, and we had been getting up and getting to breakfast at 7:30, hopping on the bus around 8:30, getting to the church about 9, having our ginger tea, and then getting out onto Bible studies and studying until later in the afternoon. So by Saturday, yeah, we were all pretty exhausted. This is Naama's kitchen, and I just had to show it to you because this is the way they build a house. They build it as they have the money to build it. And so her kitchen, she needed the stove, and there's a refrigerator over there, and she needed a place to roll out the dough. But as far as doors on the cabinets and a countertop on that on the left, no, she doesn't have that. When they get the money, they'll have that. So if we go back next year, it'll probably be close to finished. We could learn something from the people about not going in debt for a lot of things. Now I'm just going to show you a few pictures here in the next little bit. To give you a sense of what Arusha is like. This is the street out in front of the Mount Meru building. Now, again, this is in the city, and it's a kind of combination of dirt and gravel. When it rains during the rainy season, it'll be just a big old muddy street. During the dry season when we were there, it was pretty dry and dusty. The house across the way, this is like most of the houses look there. And when you get out of the way of downtown, let's see, I wanted to go back to that one. Jillian was wanting a picture of a lady carrying stuff on her head because that's what we saw everywhere. But she didn't want to be rude. And so when I saw this lady with her back to us, I thought, okay, I can take that picture and it won't be rude because she won't know about it. But this is more typical there in the city. But this is the clock tower that's downtown, and it's marks halfway between Cairo and Cape Town. There are about 4 major streets that come off of this traffic circle, and they are all paved and look pretty good. Like this is one of the downtown streets, and you may say, oh boy, they got a bunch of cars there. Yeah, these belong mainly to the East Indian and to the Wazungus who are there. There are a lot of Europeans there. And also Arusha is the center for the United Nations for that portion of Africa. And the United Nations has a whole section of houses gated off where ambassadors and others live. And so these are the ones that most of the cars belong to, and that's Mount Meru in the background there. But there's the kind of streets we were driving through most of the time. This is a picture that Gary had taken a few years ago, just to show you kind of what you see most of the time there in Tanzania and how the average person lives. And there are also several, on the main streets, several nice hotels, because Arusha is the jumping off place, you might say, for safaris. So it's a tourist center, and so you have nice hotels like that. Now, I've got just one little thing that I want to say right at the end, and I wanted to, though, for Jillian, if she had kind of a summary of just what this trip has meant to her, and then I'll end.
I wanted to mention something because we didn't mention it earlier. We had the picture of me under the tent. I wanted to talk about my Bible studies. When I went to Tanzania, I had never done personal Bible studies before. I have done devos, as the ladies have heard before, but I have never done one-on-one Bible studies. And so we were given material to read, lots of scripture and such. And so for my... Yeah, a binder full of lots of different lessons that we would be studying with the people there. And I when I went the first day, which was Tuesday, which was the first day of our campaign, I went with a woman named Elena, and she was in her mid-20s, I believe. It was her first time in Tanzania as well, but she has done mission work before, so she sort of knew how things were supposed to go. So we went along together, and we had Rachel, our translator, and I had Elena do 1 or 2 studies before I could finally see, okay, so, that's how we should act, be certain things to do. And so after Elena had done about 2 studies, I decided, okay, you do the first half, I'll do the last half. And I slowly got into doing these studies myself. And by the second day, I was able to do some studies on my own. And my first study that I did was with some Seventh-day Adventists. And that was interesting. I did it. I did the whole lesson, and I finished it, and I was like, okay, I felt pretty good about that, and I think that was well spoken. And at the end, we asked, do you have any questions? And boy, they did. So it was having Rachel with us and having Elena with me, and we all had, different minds. We were able to think of different things for each question, be like, okay, I remember this scripture, you remember that scripture, and we were able to address different points. And they had a lot of questions, and we were really able to address them. And so it was really interesting and a wonderful experience to be able to learn to talk with people there. And I was able to talk with a variety of religions. I think another man, the picture of me under the tent with Elena was when we were studying with a man named Thomas, and he was a church leader at a Pentecostal church. And he had wonderful, wonderful questions. And a lot of the people, when they ask questions, they don't do it to try to challenge you. They do it because they are genuinely curious. They want to absorb the word and know the truth. And so it was such a wonderful thing to be able to tell them the truth. And they listen. They want to hear everything that you have to say, and they'll keep asking more questions, and they want to know the scripture. They don't just want to know your opinion. And if you give them the scripture, they understand, and they know that is God's word, his authority, and they will go with it. And so it was a great experience for me to be able to do Bible studies and teach these people who were absorbing everything. It's different when you teach someone who is willing to listen. And so this trip, I first off want to thank all of you, because those of you who donated and those of you who prayed, everything you did helped. And I'm so, so thankful for everything that y'all did to help me for this trip. Before I went on this trip, I was in a little bit of a low point in my Christianity. We all have those points where we're not as good as we'd like to be. And this trip set such a firm foundation with my Christianity. It strengthened it. And I'm so, so thankful to all of you for allowing me to go on this trip, and for Sarah for guiding me, even though at times I guided her because she was kind of forgetful. So,
Old, fat, and forgetful. Okay.
But I just want to thank all of you. So thank you so much. I gained a lot from this trip. I gained so much experience. I was able to strengthen my Christianity and just learn so much about a different culture, and know that there are people in the world who want to hear God's word. There are people out there that benefit from your prayers. They benefit from your money and everything that you give. Even if you're not over there, they do benefit, and they want to learn. So thank you for everything.
Okay, I'm going to end with this little story of an event that happened. This is Paul baptizing a woman named Loema in June 2003. I had studied with Loema. She was having a class in computers, I think, kind of close to the hotel where we were staying, and she would come by after class every day, and we would have Bible study. And she wanted to be baptized, and so she was baptized in June 2003. There she is with me after she was baptized, and she was very faithful. She came back for Safari for Souls several years after that. But as I mentioned to you, in the past, Arusha just had that one church. You had to walk walk to it or take the bus or whatever. And she had fallen away. She was worshiping at a Pentecostal church, and her daughter-in-law told me that when I first got there. She said, I'm going to tell Loema that you're here because I know she'll want to see you. And Loema did want to see me. And she came on Saturday. There we are together on Saturday. And it took her about a 2-hour trip to get around. And of course, like the distance from the airport to where we were staying was 35 miles, but it took about an hour and a half to get there. You see, it just takes longer to get to places there. But she came and wanted to see me. We visited for a little while, and then I told her, I said, Paulina had told me that you are worshiping in a Pentecostal church, is that right? And she said, yes. And I said, why? She said, well, there's not a Church of Christ close to me, and this is closer to me. And so I said, Makunde, come here and let her know if there's a church close to her. And Makunde talked with her and found out, yes, there now is a church closer to her. And then I asked her, I said, describe the worship. And so she started telling me, you know, the music and the dancing and all like this. And I said, is that worship found in the Bible? Let's just look at it. We looked at John 4 on true worship, and then we looked at Leviticus 10 on the fact that God takes worship seriously, that we need to worship exactly like he says. And from there, then we went to various scriptures in the New Testament about New Testament worship. And I said, does this describe what you've been doing? She said, no, it doesn't. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it? She said, I'm going back to the Church of Christ. And I said, now, Loema, I'm going to hold you to that. I said, if I come back next year, I want to make sure that you're still faithful. And she said, I will be. I will be. And then I said, also, Loema, I want to be able to wave to you in heaven and know that you're there. And she said, I'll go. I'll be faithful. And I honestly believe that she will. But I also know that if I had not gone, Loema would still be worshiping with that Pentecostal church. And so that gave me a feeling of yes, I did something that helped this woman that I cared about come back to the Lord. Another thing that this trip has meant to me, as I told you, I'm just a simple-minded person in terms of what God can do. And I just believe if we get out there and, want to do something, that he will make the way for us to do it. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing Jillian grow while she was there. Seeing her and Elena, they were in Elena's room a lot of the time, working on answers to these questions, and I would just be listening a little bit. I said, they don't need me, they're doing fine, looking up scriptures and all. And I was just excited to see that, and I was also excited to see how the school has grown and how the church has grown in Tanzania. You see, Gary had been there, but I hadn't been back since about, 2007? I think, something like that. I hadn't been back, and a lot of my heart is still there in Tanzania, and I'm not going to let it be that long. But we appreciate you listening to us. We just had a great time, and it's been fun sharing these memories, and we've still got more. If you want to know a little bit more about it, you're probably sleepy and tired now, but we thoroughly enjoyed this and totally appreciate your prayers and your financial support. I remember years ago hearing George Bailey say, if you can't go across in person, come across in purse. And I would like to add to that also, come across in prayer, because we need all of those things. And it took all of you to get us both there and to do this. And I hope you feel a real part of this work now. Okay, thank you. And I think
we do have a microphone we can pass around if you have questions. So we can, or I can, answer questions that you might have. It can be about the Bible studies or about the lifestyle there, anything if you do have questions.
We have a young question. What's your question?
I had a family trip too.
That's not, we're looking for questions. Okay. All right. Good
Maybe
job.
we
Good
answered
job.
everything. Here's a question.
Who's that?
Percentage-wise, how much of your time was spent with people from the other from denominations in relation to people that are not members of the church?
Oh. Well, let's see, I was trying to think. Monday, we spent, encouraging the Christians. And of course, the Sundays in worship. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we also worked on Saturday. We were mainly in Bible studies with non-Christians. Now, some of the local Christians, well, like Agnes went with Makunda and me to most of the studies, but we were involved, probably, I guess you'd say 80 to 90% of our time with the non-Christians, but we were at times encouraging the local Christians as well. So,
If, just real quick, someone lost their ring, if you could look under your seats real quick to see if you by chance see a ring anywhere, that would be wonderful. Just a quick glance. Just looking to see. And if anyone else has questions, feel free to raise your hand.
we probably did such a good job.
Yeah. No more questions. You can ask me personally if you don't want to ask it in front of anybody else. I understand how that is.
And if you want to see the materials we use, Jillian has a notebook, and I have this one here, at least here, for y'all.
One other quick thought. Ooh, hello. Is this the ring here? Oh, we found the ring. All right, thank you. Off to the pawn shop. No, just kidding. Ooh, that's a nice one. There we go. Texas, indeed. That's a beautiful ring. All right, good job, Brother Bose. Or other people in the one thing about Jillian and Amber. Amber, where are you? There you are, Amber. This afternoon, we'll get to take them over to Owls Camp. In addition to what Doug and Annette have done in their home, what everyone at Bridgewood has done, that Owls Camp, I think, has been a big change for Amber and Jillian. A big opportunity for them. Gabby's been as well. Excellent opportunity for the young women to learn and grow. So remember to be in prayer for Jillian and Amber as they are on their next adventure for the summer. They've had many adventures this summer. But that's going to be an excellent opportunity. Do you have anything else you want to say? A question? Who had a question?
You said, do you have a question? Or? I thought you did. You were raising your hand. Okay.
All right. Go take your nap. Good job. Good job.